Good evening, voters. The entire debate about validity of Aadhaar, the unique identification number that every Indian should have, now lies in the courtroom of the Constitution Bench of Supreme Court. They will decide whether the government can make it mandatory for you to have your Aadhaar card for any of the government schemes, to have to give it up at every point in your life. They will decide whether your right to privacy, a fundamental right that has been said so by the Supreme Court itself, gets breached, gets violated, because of the track record that the Aadhaar leaves behind for the government and the private agencies to look into. They will decide, the Supreme Court will decide whether Aadhaar is even constitutionally valid. And it all simply boils down to right to privacy, my data, my security, in whose hands does it lie? And should the state be able to deny me my rights just because they're not able to authenticate this 16-digit number? Quick check of what really happened in the top court today before the debate begins.
A 5-judge Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court has begun the final hearing in the Aadhaar case. The bench is hearing the petitions challenging the validity of Aadhaar, contending that it violates an individual's fundamental right to privacy. Shyam Devan, appearing for petitioners, told the 5-judge bench that Aadhaar may cause the death of citizens' civil rights. The issue regarding the constitutional validity of Aadhaar and possible leakage of data has been debated since the inception of the UIDAI number. The Supreme Court has also received petitions regarding the linkage of this 12-digit number with mobile phones, bank accounts and other services, the last date for which has been extended to March 31st this year. Some petitioners in the top court have termed the linking of the 12-digit number with bank accounts and mobile numbers as illegal and unconstitutional.
Right now what we are seeing is the petitioners assailing Aadhaar on multiple aspects and pointing out to the top court the various flaws that really exist in the Act in its current form.
Even as the top court puts Aadhaar to constitutional validity test, India is discussing whether concerns are valid or sheer paranoia. The debate begins now.
I just want to begin by reading out to you the opening arguments by the lawyer who was representing the petitioners today in the Supreme Court, and he said to the courtroom, "No democratic society has adopted a program that is similar in its command and sweep. There are few judicial precedents to guide us. The closest foreign cases have all been decided in favor of the citizen, repelling the invasive program by the state." So here are the 3 questions based on what was also raised in the courtrooms today. Are the concerns about India becoming a police state, of too much surveillance, of too much policing by the state, really valid? Or is it just paranoia? Question number 2. The other aspect about government welfare schemes. For the longest time we were told with the Aadhaar the government can track and give the welfare schemes, the benefits, the funds to the people who truly deserve it. But is it even reaching those people? Or are they getting excluded? If your authentication fails, are you not part of the system? From life, birth to death and funeral, is everything just now dependent on one number, and is that fair? And question number 3. Do concerns about data security and authentication, despite the steps that UIDAI has taken, still remain? Let's say good evening to our guest, Raghu Godavar, member of the Rethink Aadhaar group, is with us tonight. Also, Advocate Supreme Court Ashish Dikshit. Let me come to you first, Raghu. I just read out what were the opening remarks by Mr. Shyam Devan in the courtroom today. Do you agree to what he also then added about fears of surveillance, too much government eyes on you on every aspect of the citizen?
Yes, in fact, if you look at the petitioner's argument, they are essentially saying that the linking of Aadhaar to all of these different databases You have your Aadhaar connected to your mobile phone, your bank accounts. You already have it to the PDS system. They're talking about adding it to the voter ID database as well. It creates an environment where someone with your Aadhaar number can potentially access the entire range of details about your life. And let me be very honest, this is no longer in the realm of paranoia. If you look at what a state like Andhra Pradesh is doing with its state resident data hub, which, as you might know, and just to inform the viewers, that this is the state-run version of the central identities repository which Aadhaar maintains, the UIDAI maintains. So these state hubs are actually collecting even more data, and they, because of their virtue of being local, have the ability to conduct a 360-degree profiling of citizens. We have already seen one article come out about Andhra Pradesh where they have mentioned how there is an Aadhaar enabled app which literally lets you zoom in on a village, lets you point to a house, and it gives you the Aadhaar number and the information of every person in the house, whether alive or dead, as long as they have an Aadhaar number. So with that, a state can use Aadhaar for surveillance is no longer a speculation. We have seen how it is made feasible, and the fears are not unfounded that a government bent on surveilling its citizens, maybe not the current one, but maybe the next one or the one after that, could very well use Aadhaar for that purpose. They have the tools already in place, and here's the thing, most of the argument has juggled around which government facilitated this, whether the Aadhaar Act made it possible. The fact remains that if you look at the very design of Aadhaar, if you go back to 2010 and see some of the early documents and how the UIDAI database was envisioned and implemented, it had all the tools right from the start. The ability to conduct biometric authentication, which involves not just fingerprints and iris scans, but also face scans. And the next step, which has already been spoken about in Parliament, DNA profiling. So there is, every chance that using the Aadhaar database, someone can prepare a profile of and the average citizen, which includes every kind of information and not just their demographic details or where they stay or how much ration they consume. And that is not, to repeat, it is not paranoia, it is a fear that has very valid, very real concerns behind it.
No, but if the fact is also to say that this is a way of the government just keeping a track of your identity or authenticating your identity, ensuring that your taxes are paid, ensuring that there are no illegal transactions that are taking place, or even ensuring that the government welfare schemes reach you, or when it comes to security concerns, larger national security concerns, then how do you draw the line? Raghu, how do you draw the line between what a state or a central government should have as information to be able to make you secure and shouldn't have because it's your own private life and information, which Google probably already does have?
Look, the government already has pieces of data about us that allows the government and its agencies to perform these functions. It is not that they do not have that. You have a PAN card which connects to your income tax returns. You have a ration card which allows you to get your PDS rations on time. In such a system, and if you look at it, there have been studies conducted from the time the Aadhaar scheme was implemented, where they have shown that the efficacy of various existing welfare schemes were improving even through just digitization rather than requiring this sort of a linkage. And again, let me repeat this, the issue is not with individual databases but how they are mutually linked through this one unique ID. If you had systems earlier in place, the passport database is fairly secure. There have never been major security concerns ever voiced about the fact that the passport database has biometrics as well. But you have to understand how the system is protected. Limitation of purpose is the very first aspect of it. What data has been given to the government is used specifically for the purpose of identifying you at an airport, at immigration, or at customs. Nothing beyond that. Whereas with one Aadhaar number, with one 12-digit number, you are telling the government that it has access to every piece of data about a person. Data that doesn't even need to exist together in any sense of the manner, because tomorrow, if you look at the kind of data leaks that have happened, and if you look at the kind of data that's already been put out publicly, even by government agencies, the 210 websites that have leaked Aadhaar data, for example, you can use any piece of that information to get another piece of information about the person that is already not in the database. One simple example, the UIDI itself provided a service by which you could send an SMS to a number. If I recollect correctly, it's *99*9#. You need to check this.
Yeah.
But you can, if you have a person's Aadhaar number, you can message that number to this SMS service and find out which bank they have an account in.
Okay.
Now, why would anyone need that?
Okay. Well,
A person would already know where their bank account is. They wouldn't
people
need
want to double check
send an SMS to find out.
The assumption was that people want to just double check if the linking of their bank account has been done or not. But I get the point that you're trying to make. I think Ashish Dikshit is back with us. We had a bit of an audio issue there. But I just also want to read out another part of what the petitioners or their lawyer said in court today. That this is creating an electronic leash, a trail. This leash is connected to a central database that is designed to track transactions across the life of the citizen. This record will enable the state to profile citizens, track their movements, assess their habits, silently influence their behavior. Over time, the profiling enables the state to stifle dissent and influence even political decision making. It goes on to add further to this, ending by saying several state governments have started using the Aadhaar platform to build profiles of residents. Raghu was also referring to that is reminiscent of totalitarian regimes. Ashish Dikshit, where do you stand on this? Is it reminiscent of a totalitarian regime, or does it look straight out of Netflix show right now? What has been said today in courtrooms?
See, I am surprised at the strategy which has been adopted by the petitioner in this matter. It appears that they want to create an hysteria in the mind of public that Aadhaar is the biggest demon they are ever going to face. Why is there so much of opposition to a government which is elected by us to have data which will enable them to govern in more effective manner? We have seen since the Aadhaar has come into operation, the multiple leakages have already stopped. The government, I believe, had given out a figure of 600 crore worth leakage which has been stopped. So any law may have its disadvantages, but we need to weigh and analyze the advantages which is going to be acted upon by implementation of Aadhaar law. And I don't agree with this kind of submissions that it is going to create a leash upon every citizen. No, absolutely not. And we should also understand that we are living in a democratic country. The government is nothing but the representative of the people. And if we think that state is going to fail us, we have courts. The Supreme Court, the High Court in every state is sitting, which will ensure that state does not misuse the authority which is being given by the Aadhaar Act. So we need to be, have some confidence upon the machinery and the mechanism which is provided under the constitution of our country.
But who will keep a check on whether the data is getting misused or not? Globally, there are several examples where the state was effectively spying on its citizens, and for the longest time, citizens didn't know about it. Who's going to check?
Now, if I may say, now you see the circular number 1 which was issued by the government last week clearly protects your main data. There was an apprehension in the mind of people that my fingerprint, my eye retina and everything will be given to third party. That has been stopped by creation of virtual identity. So every private body such as the mobile agency or the bank, private banks will not have the entire data. They will just have a temporary virtual ID which would be created by you, and it gives you an authority to change it. So the apprehension has already been taken care by the government. I think we must appreciate the fact that the government is being receptive to the suggestions being given by the various stakeholders in this implementation of Aadhaar Act.
Okay, I agree with you. The government has been receptive, the government has been responsive. We've seen changes being brought in, including what you referred to, the virtual identity, face recognition, and several other measures that have come in. Raghu, you want to respond to what Ashish said before we move on to the second question?
Yes. So there are three specific things I would like to respond to. First of all, Ashish is a lawyer and he's more familiar with the constitution than I am, I'm sure. The first fact that he forgets, and which I will repeat for him, is the privacy judgment that was brought out last year specifically pointed out that if the government must infringe on a person's privacy for delivery of welfare benefits, for more efficient delivery of welfare benefits, it must do so in a manner that is not arbitrary, that does not make the risk disproportional to the infringement, and that has a very limited purpose. These are the three strong tests that the Supreme Court recommended. With Aadhaar, the issue is that all three tests are the current Aadhaar Act actually fails all three tests. And again, I would like to, point out the fact that Ashish is not keeping up with what is happening in the realm of Aadhaar savings. If that were the singular purpose which the government had used Aadhaar for, again, this was something the Supreme Court had mandated not once but twice and thrice. They had reaffirmed their order of 2013 in 2015 and in 2017. They had asked the government that it should ensure that people know that Aadhaar cannot be made mandatory, that people should know that they cannot be denied a service or a benefit for want of Aadhaar. The government has not done any of that. And one of the arguments that Mr. Diwan made in court today was to point out how a bill that was introduced in Parliament in 2010 as the first step towards bringing Aadhaar into existence, the National ID NIDAI bill, and that bill was actually rejected by the Standing Committee of Finance a year later. They threw it out. They said that the kind of risks it posed to a citizen are unwarranted.
Yeah.
That same bill has come back into existence as the Aadhaar Act today. That isn't indicative of a government responsive, because in these years what has happened is scholars have pointed out how Aadhaar is literally disrupting the welfare mechanism.
Yeah.
My friend Ashish quoted a number, 600 crores in savings. That has been disputed by multiple reports, on-ground reports that have quoted parliamentary figures. The actual, there was a World Bank report that quoted something exorbitant. I'm not sure if the currency conversion is accurate. They said 9 to 11 billion US dollars. Now that was found to be the total potential savings from all possible, methods of making welfare.
Well, the numbers may be debatable, Raghu. The numbers may be debatable. Suffice to say, if
Yes,
there is
but
actual
the point
intent
I'm
to
making
fight
is that-
against corruption,
Yes.
you can plug in the leakages this way or that way. Now, whether you do it through an electronic
Yes.
trail or an Aadhaar number and bank accounts, or you
No,
actually
that is
crack
the thing.
down on the people who are coming in the middle of that chain and taking away the benefits and not allowing it to reach the right people. So because you're talking about that, let's go across to question number 2, which speaks about exclusion is what is happening rather than inclusion, which was the intent, Ashish. Now, so whether you talk about bank accounts, your life insurance policies, your financial investments, whether you talk about your LPG, or any of the government or welfare schemes for the poor as well, whether you just talk about simplest things as ration and people not being able to get their ration because there is some kind of a problem with the authentication system, their Aadhaar number or their identity is not being validated, and so they are being devoid of those rights. Now, numerous clarifications of the government has not helped. People are not getting that ration. People are still being hounded by financial services companies to link their insurance premiums, otherwise they don't get the certificate. Now, why is that still happening? Doesn't that point then get validated? And on the petitioners right in saying, when they say that the state is empowered with a switch by which it can cause the civil death of an individual, where every basic facility is linked to Aadhaar, and one cannot live in a society without an Aadhaar number. The switching off of Aadhaar can actually literally destroy the individual. Ashish Dikshit.
Yes, and it has.
See,
it has
one thing
literally
which I would
resulted
like
in
to
deaths.
point
If you
out,
count
my
the
learn-
cases of
my
Santoshi
friend,
Kumari and Aitvarya Devi in
my
Jharkhand.
Raghu,
friend,
let me
my
go
friend
across to Ashish
referred to
Dikshit
two
first,
orders of
and I'll come
Supreme
back
Court.
to you. Yes. Ashish Dikshit, please.
Yes, see, my learned friend referred to two orders passed by Supreme Court, and he implied that the government has been violating those orders. That means that the government has not followed what Supreme Court has said. In fact, a specific contempt was filed against the government by the petitioners, and that contempt petition was not entertained by Supreme Court. This shows that this thing has no merit. Now, coming to whether the Aadhaar is going to benefit certain people, of course it's going to benefit. Whether my right to privacy or his right to privacy can supersede the right of getting basic services of millions of citizens of this country. We must understand that at the end of the day, right to privacy is a private right. Whereas if a larger public interest is involved, if the law is going to satisfy the test of larger public interest, or the right to privacy will always take a back step. And the last thing which I would like to point out, the banks or the government sector, if it is saying that the people need to link their Aadhaar card, I think that deadline has been clarified by the government on multiple occasions, that the deadline is 31st of March and it can be extended keeping in view the pendency of the Supreme Court case. That is, and all these things are very small issues. My submission is this, that if we all agree that yes, Aadhaar is going to serve the purpose, it is going to stop the leakages, then whether there are certain small aberrations in which there are issues with regard to the implementation, that can always be worked out. The system can be improved.
Yes.
The system is not something which is
perfect.
perfect.
It's a small aberration, but for that one person, for that 175-year-old senior citizen whose authentication is failing for whatever reasons, face recognition or fingerprints or any other reason, is not going to get the pension for that month and is not going to be able to survive that month without support from the society. Now that's, for that person, is a matter of life and death. So we can't brush it away saying it's just an aberration.
I agree, and compare, now you compare this thing, that
Yes,
if person is not
absolutely
getting
correct.
pension from one particular thing, whereas we have seen circumstances wherein the people have been obtaining pensions from different departments of government. I'll give you a very small example of Delhi itself, that in Delhi you get pension from MCD as well as from Delhi government, and the numbers are limited. You will find the same people getting the pension from MCD as well as from the Delhi government. Are they not sitting over the right of some other individual? This thing, when Aadhaar is linked to their pension account, will stop. You will not have a single person taking pension from multiple government departments.
Okay, fair enough. The larger question of the benefits that actually reach a bigger number of people. Raghu Godavar.
Yes. So if you make the point to be whether welfare schemes and pensions are actually reaching the right people, very simply, study after study has shown that Aadhaar cannot make that efficient. One simple example. You have the concept of ghosts, which Aadhaar was supposed to eliminate. Just yesterday, The Wire ran a story where they showed that the god Hanuman had an Aadhaar card, and not only did that Aadhaar card exist, for 2 years after it had been first discovered, it was actually linked to someone else's phone number, and someone else was receiving funds in their bank account because of that. You had a similar case for a Pakistani spy. So, if you are saying that Aadhaar is going to ensure that citizens get their rights, as Ashish said, first of all, Aadhaar isn't even a proof of citizenship. Any resident of India from an income tax standard who has lived in India for more than 180 days in a calendar year can get an Aadhaar. There was a case last week where a Pakistani citizen had jumped over the airbase in Jaisalmer, and he was found to have an Aadhaar because he had been living in India for 18 years on a long-term visa. So if you're saying that Aadhaar is this golden device that will magically, vanish leakages in welfare schemes, it has already proved that it cannot do so. And here's the kicker. The story that was run today by Go News, which was a follow-up on the Kanpur Aadhaar fake Aadhaar racket, where hackers had actually found a way to create fingerprints using chemicals and therefore seed new entries, create new enrollments into the Aadhaar system. Go News followed up on that and they found that UIDAI cannot even tell apart the actual enrollment and the fake enrollment. So on the one hand, you have real people who are getting excluded from the system because they do not have an Aadhaar. And Mr. Diwan pointed out this in court today. 6.3 crore people already have been denied an Aadhaar because their biometrics could not be captured. 6.3 crore is not a small aberration. It is not something you can, wave away with one hand.
Okay.
It's a significant percentage of our population, and that is just in 7 years.
Well, the one point cannot be denied.
And
There are
the point.
issues
I mean, if you
which are coming up every day.
Real and fake people.
Yes, well, that is something that UIDAI will have to come out and explain to us if that indeed happened and how is that then being tackled. But one thing cannot be denied, that issues are cropping up. There seem to be some response coming in from UIDAI, the Aadhaar authority, and even the government in trying to fix. But the larger picture remains the constitutional validity of Aadhaar, whether it violates my right as a citizen in all aspects, not just privacy. I have a caller on the phone line. Let me see if I can go across to Manikjeet calling us from Mumbai, I believe. Good evening, Manikjeet.
Good evening. Madam, for the last 6 months, hello?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, for the last 6 months, the Aadhaar particulars have been taken by the Bank of India, and still the pension, a mere pension of 1,000 rupees, and practically every day, every month, a senior citizen is going to the bank, but there is no conclusion to that. They have taken the fingerprints, they have taken everything, but that they are not dispatching the pension to the bank. Bank is saying come after 1 month, come after second month, and this way about 9 months have passed.
So what is the reason that they are giving, Mr. Manekji, I'm sorry, your audio is not...
There is not any reason. First they said there was no date of birth. That was also mentioned, that was given. There was the thing of UID number which was given, to them fingerprint was given, biometric was given also, but still there is no thing applied from the government. Still the pension has not come, and there are many like this.
Okay, Mr. Manekji, I would request you to send us the details, and we will also see if we can get a response from the authority to see where it is exactly stuck. Thank you for calling. Mr. Vinod Jain calling us from Chennai. Good evening, Mr. Jain.
Yeah, very good evening. I just want to ask to Mr. Ashish Dikshit. Yeah, could you hear me?
Yes, he can. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Mr. Ashish Dikshit, is India a democratic country or a dictatorship country? You just tell me what the word says.
Why do you believe, Mr. Jain, that we are turning into a dictatorship because of Aadhaar?
Everything is running on. It is like a dictatorship country. Democracy, we have lost democracy.
I still believe we are a very strong democratic system and a very strong democratic country, Mr. Jain. But
Shukla, there is no use of believing you. People should believe. Okay.
Right. All right, Mr. Vinod Jain. Very angry viewer there calling us with his comments. Ashish, do you have anything to say to Mr. Vinod Jain?
I believe this was an aberration of a viewer, like we have aberrations with Aadhaar Act.
All right. But the other caller had a valid problem, and there are lots of citizens out there who are still a little confused.
I know.
Who are still running from one office to the other to try and resolve, Ashish, and that is going to be a big challenge. Perhaps not a challenge that the Supreme Court could look at, but maybe the government should have thought about that before bringing in Aadhaar on all aspects of our life.
Yes, that has been a problem since the beginning. The question has been asked since 2010 as to what is the rush? Why has the government, conducted such few feasibility studies? Mr. Diwan asked the same question this morning as well. One thing that he recollected was that the original Aadhaar pilot had been run on just 20,000 people. and that data had been duplicated so that they could run the deduplication test, and a sample, and they found that even there were a significant percentage that were causing mismatches, and that when computed against the population of India meant that literally for every single person enrolled in the Aadhaar database, the probability was that there were 15,000 duplicates. 15,000 is again not a small number. You know, this is where Mr. Diwan made the point that the whole argument is now probabilistic. That Aadhaar will actually authenticate that I am who I claim to be is literally 1 in 15,000. That is the chance. And that is too minuscule. And here's the thing, what was happening, for example, with PDS before Aadhaar came about. Take the smallest village as an example. Most people used to go to a shop where they knew the shopkeeper. There was a facial recognition, there was a personal connection, the person seemed to know their family, they would have a friendly chit chat about what their kids were doing. There existed that sort of mutual trust between citizens.
No, but let's also not deny the fact, Raghu Godawar, that a lot of people were not getting their due ration because it wasn't even reaching the ration shops. The government was being told that, you know, an XYZ amount of citizens have been given their due, but it wasn't reaching them. Even today, if you talk about the various state governments' farm loan waivers, it's not reaching most of these farmers.
That's the thing. This is where the feasibility studies are important.
Yeah. Ashish Dikshit, you want to add to that?
I agree, and those are issues that have required difficult studies. Those have been studied for years, and if you read the papers by people like Ritika Khera and Jean Drege, they have pointed out how the system that was being brought in before Aadhaar, the digitization of PDS, for example, had already delivered several gains that are now being wiped out by Aadhaar. Just this morning, Jean Drege wrote a column where he also, talked about the upcoming DBT scheme, which is being piloted in Chhattisgarh. Citizens now have to go to a bank, then to a Prayog Kendra, which is supposed to hand out their pensions on authenticating their identity through Aadhaar, and then they go and get their rations. It's become a three-step process.
Okay, so
isn't that putting citizens in more difficulties?
Yes.
How is that making delivery more efficient?
Well, if only people were clearer about the message that the government has already put out,
and all this is being
these
done
things
because
wouldn't be happening. Yes, but if only people, local administration of various states would be clearer about what the center has already said, these confusion and these problems would not emerge. Question number 3, very quickly because we are out of time, but we've already addressed the problem of data security and authentication. The CIA, it seems, according to a New Indian Express report, it can access India's entire Aadhaar database. We've had BJP leaders who've spoken about it. This is what WikiLeaks stated. There were reports that suggested that an RTI activist claimed Aadhaar contract was given to foreign firms and they got the access to the encrypted data. About 200 government websites have already made Aadhaar details public. The center has acknowledged in Supreme Court that Aadhaar card holder data has been leaked for about 135 million. We do know a CIS report says that the data came out. Ashish Dikshit, are we too far along now to even have the conversation we are having today in the Supreme Court? Because so many people have already linked all of their aspects of life to this Aadhaar, and we don't know if the data is already out there and with whom. Is this redeemable?
See, the notification which was released few days back gave us the figure of around 119 out of 125 crore people, 119 crore have already enrolled. So in my understanding, Aadhaar is here to stay. We all as the stakeholders should make sure that we give suggestions to the government so that Aadhaar can be implemented and the leakages and the data breach and other fallacies can be looked into and they can be sorted out. We cannot just sit and criticize a particular law saying that no, this should not have been done. As of now, Aadhaar is here to stay. If tomorrow, I don't expect that if 119 crore people have already enrolled in Aadhaar, I don't think it is practically possible to delete everything and come back to square one.
Yeah.
Now, in my understanding, and for the welfare of the citizen,
It is possible.
Yes.
let's
It's been done.
give our suggestions. Let's try to improve the law. If my learned friend says that yes, there are data leakages, he should also write to government
Okay,
saying,
I'm
write to the
completely running
government
out of
saying
time, so I'll have
this,
to
you
interrupt
should
you.
do
My
a particular
apologies
thing.
for that. I just want to also point out that in tonight's debate, the results of the live polls are out. And in fact, while about half, 50% people do not agree with what Ashish is saying, almost about 78 to 80% people, the last time I checked on the poll, do agree with what Godavar is saying. The debate is still going on, the jury is still out, literally, because the case is going on. It's one of the biggest cases. Don't brush it off to say it's something technical or government policy that is being decided in the Supreme Court. It matters to you as a citizen, because every aspect of your life literally is now linked to this unique identification number that the government has given you, from your financial transactions to your financial savings and investments, to your mobile phones, to your bank accounts, to the property that you buy, to the government schemes that you avail, to in certain cases even where your children are going to study, to your mobile phone bills and who you're calling and what you're doing. So many aspects of your life depend on this, and if this system is not foolproof, and if it is going to fall into the wrong hands and the government is not going to be able to do something about it, then we need to know, we need to ask those questions, and we need to keep a very close track on as these conversations really pan out in the courtrooms in front of the Constitution bench of the Supreme Court in the coming days. For now, it's a wrap on this edition of Last Word. I thank both of our panelists for joining us tonight.